Welcome, Shiv. Super excited to have you here today to discuss and share your story. For those of you that don't know, Shiv is the founder and president of NeuraLace Medical, a company committed to combating chronic nerve pain in a non-invasive way. I'm excited for you to share your story today, Shiv, and part of that is around medical school and seeing pain points with actual patients and researching this technology. So I think it's a really cool story and a lot of ups and downs from an entrepreneurial journey, and I think a lot of like lessons learned from a personal development side and just the different areas of life I know you're looking to excel in. I'm a big admirer and supporter, and it's been cool to see your journey along the way.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. You've been a big part of my journey, and we've grown a lot together. So it's cool to sort of be here and reflect and share, what we've learned over the years, and hopefully we can, add value to other people that are, either part of Junto or looking to become, a part of it or not.
Yeah, I think they're like, the way I think about it, Shiv, is like, how do we take the wisdom that's been like hard earned, like a lot of like scars, a lot of challenges, a lot of sleepless nights, and how do we take that wisdom to share with other leaders and entrepreneurs to speed up their journey or to accelerate their journey and to prevent some of the, and it's yeah, that's how I'm thinking about it. And excited, where this will go to is we'll have the opportunity to do some Q&A together and a forum experience on Thursday with some of our members. So excited to kind of get this story and wisdom in their hands, and then we can engage with it more together on Thursday.
Sweet.
So I was thinking, like, as far as like how to approach this, rather than just kind of like asking random open-ended questions, is diving a little bit into your past and like what was remarkable about that, what set you up, and then diving into present, and then exploring the future together.
Sure. How far back are we talking?
Yeah, like what is, like, when you think back, like, to your childhood, like to being young and kind of pre-medical school, like what's most notable or remarkable that you think makes you who you are today?
Sure. Yeah, I think like super early on, my parents were immigrants, and learning that they didn't have enough money for a lot of things. It's like hearing my mom cry about stuff made me very present to kind of the realities that we were living in, and sort of motivated me to like start thinking about ways to create value. And like early on, I was like, in elementary school, like fixing VCRs, and we'd get paid like $5 for that, or like washing cars, and like, going to garage sales and picking up broken Christmas lights and video game consoles and electronics, because before there was like only like 3 brands. It was like JVC, Sony, and Panasonic, or what have you, right? And everybody had those that were broken, and they would just like hand them out at garage sales. And I would start to like solder equipment together before even knowing what I was like soldering. Just it gave me the ability to like learn and kind of become familiar with technology without like a sense of fear. Like now, if I open up any electronic device, I'm like scared to touch anything, because I'm like, something could blow up or like I could destroy something just by touching it wrong. But before, it's just like, following curiosity. And so kind of getting motivated by a lack of resources and then learning resourcefulness was really, I think it stands out earlier on in my like kind of childhood.
That really hits home, like resonates with me around like finding ways to add value from like a young age, because of just like the reality that there was no other option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it transitioned me from kind of being a passive kind of, being passive and receiving to like asking what can I do, right? Like just giving a sense of initiative around everything except for chores.
You just mean there's certain things you don't like to do?
I know I remember like I would like push back if my mom told me to do something, but like this I would go sneak out and do,
Yeah.
garage. Yeah.
It's funny. I'm having this like weird realization right now that when I actually enjoy doing the work, like sitting down and like doing that like quiet like work, and like although I have like this resistance around it sometimes, or like I want to avoid certain like sprinting through a sauna or just certain tasks, that once I do it I actually like deeply find like joy and like gratitude, but not, I don't know if gratitude's the right word, but like I'm glad I did it.
It feels good. Yeah. Like creating or like doing something of value every day, and, knowing, what it is, like, what would it mean to be successful today? Right. And then like crushing that thing feels really good. Right. Yeah. I think there's something there, and like, that really resonates, and kind of designing a day around that, so you're setting yourself up for success is like a fun hack.
Yeah. I'm thinking about Gestalt a little bit, and at the same time, like how, that idea of like setting myself up for the like success for the next day. Is there some things that you do? Like, what do you do to set yourself up for success the next day?
Yeah, I think it used to be me by myself, and now it's kind of transitioned into our company. But just starting off on Mondays, understanding what success looks like at the end of the week. Like on Friday, how will we know if we were successful this week? And just getting super clear on that. And then that sort of trickles down into daily goals. And I think the biggest thing is like understanding what that one thing is, or two things are, and just working on that until that part's done. And usually it's not the hardest thing. It's more about like not having clarity and doing a bunch of other things. But when you have clarity, it makes life a lot more fun, because you have measurable progress. Like if you don't know at the end of the week if you were successful or not, how do you feel happy about your work? Right. And so in the beginning, it's just like choose anything. And then, get better at selecting that thing.
So powerful you say that, because a big part, like not a big part, but like an important part of our program is the weekly planning. Like one of our tools is weekly planning, and really setting out some time to plan out the week, but also with the basis of reflection and reflecting back on the week. And when you say all that to me, like for me, the biggest challenge has been just putting too much on the plate each week, and then just like feeling just overwhelmed by it, and like there's no win, right? There's no possible way to win. But I think over time that becomes the lesson, that like, hey, like you're putting, or I'm putting too much on my plate, and I need to think more accurately. And that's more important to choose the priorities. Like really, what does success look like, and think through that.
Definitely. I've like shadowed some of my board members thinking that they're running like meetings back to back, and like in my mind everything they did seemed important and busy, and like I get there and they're just like sitting there thinking. They took like one or two calls, for example, right? And I was like, this is what you do? Like, this is wild. He's like, yeah, protect my thinking time. And he just sat there while he think, like he did some thinking. And it was really interesting, because I learned that like thinking is the one thing we can't outsource, our discernment, our judgment. And like sometimes things take time to really coalesce, and it's hard in the sense that when you're thinking about productivity, it's not a discrete task that you can knock out and like check off on Asana, right? Thinking, it's not like a document that you're sending or something that is sort of tangible. But you can't fall into the trap of like because it's not tangible, not scheduling it.
Yeah, I've heard that from so many different people, and I've heard different people. Sometimes people schedule thinking time in the mornings, where it's like, hey, the mornings they're thinking, and then they'll do meetings and take calls in the afternoon. I've also heard some entrepreneurs do it like in the evenings. I'm curious, when do you do your thinking time?
Some of my best thinking is in the shower.
I was going to say the same thing. That's funny.
And then the other ones is like just in traffic and driving. Like it's like unintentional thinking time.
Yeah.
And I think the golden thread there is like, it's like the prefrontal cortex is engaged in something. Like something's, taking attention away, water hitting your back or your body or driving. And like the other parts of your brain start to process. And us observing is helpful. That triggers the thinking, right? And new ideas start to form.
Well, I think what's interesting about the shower too is that there's not like a lot of other usually we don't have our phone or iPads or just like a lot of other noises and stimulant, like places where we get noise from or stimulus isn't in that environment. Sometimes that happens in the car, right? When we don't want to listen to music, or like when we're not listening to a podcast or something. But it's like when do we actually like shut the noise off now?
Mm-hmm.
And I think some people do a really good job of it, right? And I think some people, it's sometimes it's like an addiction to information and like new ideas and new stimulants.
Yeah, it's funny, like being on a flight and then the Wi-Fi goes out, and all of a sudden, like you can't do anything but think, and those are some of my most productive moments.
Yeah. And I think, and with, I don't want to go too hard into spirituality as part of this conversation, although maybe I shouldn't have any restrictions on it. But as I've learned from different practitioners of different spiritual disciplines, and I've learned that there's a practical side of it around this, like, hey, what does success look like this week? And then executing that, with the idea of like service and impact and serving like a higher good, and then potentially like rewarding ourselves for a job well done, right? And then resting and relaxing and recharging, and then kind of going back to it and building out like a cadence or a rhythm that's potentially natural, right? Like that exists, I don't want to say in nature, but right, like these cycles exist.
Yeah, like the work that we do now isn't really natural, and I think earlier on I never knew what success would look like at the end of the week, and so I worked constantly, right? But yeah, understanding boundaries and giving yourself time to recharge, for me, helps me bring in the energy that I need to get our customers excited, get our team excited, get myself excited. Otherwise it's a drain, and it's hard to like do good work in those moments, like be inspired.
Yeah, I think you're starting to touch on kind of like that paradox between Elon Musk, Gary Vee, like hustle, and then like the work-life balance, work-life harmony, making time for the different sides. And I'm wondering, like, do you think for you, like, I know when you're first starting out, like when we're first starting out, there's like this like kind of feeling of survival, right? Where it's like, oh shoot, like, I'm just, I need to like get this going, and then spending years, spending like a period of time getting that in place to be able to start, extending potentially like the overwhelm or the burnout that can cause from just being 24/7, 365.
One thing I've learned is that burnout happens not when you do too much of one thing. It happens when you stop doing the other things that you love. And that was a cool breakthrough for me. It's much easier to like incorporate doing some of the things that you love. Like I'll go mountain biking, or go on a hike with Hito, or just spend time with Hito, my wife, and hang out with friends or grab a steak. It's easy when you think about incorporating things you love because you love doing them, and it's not a hard thing to get on board with, right? But before, I would not do the things I loved and not really control how many hours I was putting in, and I thought burnout was because I was working too hard. But it's I think the spirituality side kind of, or at least the spirit, gets recharged when you do the things you love. Like you feel alive. And I think that there's been times when I like would, you know, skip my morning routine for like a month, and I don't even feel like myself anymore. And so, having that time in the morning to just be by myself and not work and just, be myself basically and be with myself, makes me feel human. Otherwise, like I wake up and I'm like working, and then I go to bed, wrapping up work, and I feel like a zombie, and I like start to forget who I am. But having like a morning routine is a good way to continuously ensure I get my the things that I love doing. And yeah.
What is your morning routine?
Right now it's, so usually I have a Peloton that I'll hop on, but right now it's in storage because we're moving. But I'm working on my intentions right now, the work we've done with Dimitri, just meditating and getting present to the intentions that I want to set for the day, and sort of just increasing my frequency, and not like jumping on Twitter first thing in the morning or anything like that. Just being by myself, getting aligned, understanding, like being grateful for, the day I have ahead of me, getting clear on what I need to do, and what success will look like, and just, focusing on the intentions, doing the qigong, and just raising my energy levels until I'm like, all right, let's go.
Yeah. Do you have to do that throughout the day? Like, do you have to check in on that and do that throughout the day as well?
All the time. Yeah.
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 It's good awareness. Thanks for sharing. I almost want to like go into the evolution of morning routines, but I don't want to nerd out too much. But I love what you said there about like just creating space to like meditate. And I've been really working on like also doing like journaling, like long form journaling, and really like getting my ideas out. And I find there's this weird blend of meditating leading to journaling, and journaling leading to meditating, and then like getting called to like read, and then I'll start like reading, and or sometimes I'll start with reading and then it'll go to writing and then it'll go to meditating, and it's just this kind of upward spiral that starts. And for me,
Yeah.
like when I try to over engineer it or over control it, it becomes like really not fun. But when I learn to just like flow with it and just be like, hey, this is actually me time. Like, what would serve me? I can do push-ups right now. I could go in the sauna. Like one thing leads to another. I'm glad.
I think
You
it's
mentioned
all
that.
about like doing the things that get you excited, that you want to do, that are going to raise your energy.
I'm just taking notes as you say this, because I'm going to reflect back on this. This is a great guy.
Yeah.
I appreciate the wisdom.
Well, going back to the childhood thing really quickly, I remember being like painfully bored, like walking around thinking there has to be more than just like grass and like bikes and like broken record players and stuff like that. Like this can't be it. Like this is not good enough. And just being like painfully bored and like playing and stuff, but still like back of my mind, like there was like a spot that wasn't being hit. And now that spot is being hit. And, I was labeled as ADHD and all of the other things, but I think I was just like chronically bored. And now I get to like do exactly what I want to do every single day. And becoming present to that and being very aware of how painful it was, when I was younger, kind of gives me the opportunity to, choose what I want to do that's super exciting and not lose track of that.
Your gratitude's contagious.
Yeah, I feel like I was born in some time and it was super boring, and I was like, I want to be born in the best time ever, and like here we are.
And what's the biggest in the biggest change for you is being able to like focus on your purpose? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that's a big one. I was speaking with somebody earlier last week, and they asked me like what I define success to be. And for me, on a personal level, it was being able to invest my energy on like a day-to-day to minute-to-minute level of exactly where I want to invest it. And that's not always the reality. And it is more of a reality now than it was, 11 years ago when I started. But just like using that as a way to calibrate, like being able to invest my energy in moving, the business forward, moving my health forward, moving the relationship forward, and not feeling that friction of, damn, I really wish I could be doing this right now, and not being able to do it.
It makes my heart tingle to hear you say that. And I feel like there's this like strange, like just like moment of like a peek into why capitalism is kind of interesting, or like, why it's the best model we have currently, is because there's been this like, you have this alignment between how you've chosen to add value, like how you can like uniquely add value, and like what also like turns you on, and like gives you that moment where you can drop the ADHD and really focus on like staying, continuing to do this for extended periods of time with tremendous amounts of energy and mental effort, with investors and customers and employees, and it's all like magnified and leveraged, right?
Yeah. Yep. Leverage is key.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's different ways to get that leverage. One of our members who I've had share his wisdom like through this has been talk to me about these like three principles. It was probability, leverage, and simplicity. Like simplicity, probability, and leverage, as far as like the three principles that he learned and applied within his business. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I always want to work on the simplicity one, frankly.
Seriously. Yeah. I mean, it's just becoming more and more clear to me how important it is to say no to all the things that come up during the week, and just doing that one thing, and constantly having to reinforce that with our team of like, hey, I know you guys have all these great ideas and I'm not going to do any of them. And it's almost painful to say that, but the thing is, when I am able to focus, the things that come to fruition are like 100x more exciting than that cool idea that someone had. And then nobody cares about that other stuff that I didn't do. It's like, holy shit, go do more of that.
Yeah, and sometimes it's like, oh, that wasn't a good idea anyway. It's like, hey, I thought about it longer and I don't think that was a good idea. It's like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's a super valuable lesson. So anything else you want to say? Like I'm curious, how did you decide like you wanted to go to medical school?
That's a good question. Oh yeah, I remember now. and I like when I started high school, like stem cells were the thing.
Lifetimes ago.
Yeah. And whenever like stem cells popped up anywhere in the news or whatever, like I literally stopped everything I was doing and I was like, what's the latest? And I would like buy magazines about them, and I just thought they were the coolest thing. And I had a AP bio teacher who was like probably one of the best teachers I've had. He like believed in me. I went to school in like a ghetto, and his belief in me, I think, was what kind of helped me believe in myself. And he took us to, so he was applying to UCSF med school, and when he got in, he took us there, and I just met the most fascinating people. Everybody there, like there was no judgment on age. They were answering all these questions and they were doing all these cool things. And I was like, this is where I want to be. And so kind of decided in that moment that that was kind of the path I wanted to go down. But in undergrad, I was volunteering. Like I wanted to do like volunteer in like medical settings to get a better sense of, where my interests lie. And I really wanted to do like electrophysiology, which is like EKGs and stuff. But in order to apply for that internship, you have to choose three total programs to apply to. EKG was one of them. I think the second one was like in neurology or like neurosurgery or something. And then the third one, I couldn't choose because all of them sucked. And I was like, I don't want to choose a third one. They're like, you have to. And so I just chose one, and it was like drug rehab clinics. And it was more out of frustration of just like not being able to choose because they all sucked. And I just picked one. And of course, that's the one I got. And I was like dreading it the night before, like starting, thinking that there would be like, it's kind of the Hollywood narrative of who's at a rehab clinic, like people that are forced to be there by family members that like, did an intervention and like forced somebody to go there. When I got there, that's not what I saw. I just saw like responsible adults that went through like some minor surgery or something like that and were given opioids, weren't given any of the precautions, got hooked and just wanted to be off. And I remember like the year the iPhone came out, I want to say 2008, but like I waited in line and got the iPhone, and somebody did like one of those, they cracked it open and showed what's inside of it, and there's just like millions of connections. And I remember a woman having knee pain, and we had just done anatomy, and the knee is like the part of the body that you sort of do in a day, where all the other body parts you do for weeks, because it's so simple. And this woman had knee pain, and I was just like holding the phone thinking like, how did we get to the phone, which has millions of connections and it's super complex, but we haven't figured out like knee pain. Like it seems kind of ridiculous. And I feel like we just haven't invested enough time in understanding it. So I became like so fascinated by understanding the neurology. I changed my major from like biomedical engineering to neurobiology, physiology, behavior, and biomedical engineering.
Holy cow.
And then I literally entered a rabbit hole that I'm still in.
What a cool story. So it was putting together the different connections within an iPhone and then the different connections within the human body related to knee pain.
It was just like looking at how absurd it is that we figured out a million connections on one end, right? Yeah. And there's like a couple on the knee that we haven't figured out. Like the cross section of a knee is like a handful of variables. Literally, like we can label every single one of them. And in my mind, I was like, how the hell haven't we figured it out? There's like 4 things there,
Yeah, I really appreciate how your mind works. It's really cool to hear.
Yeah, it was slightly naive thinking that we haven't, we just haven't tried hard enough. It was slightly naive and it's slightly true. It was like the answer is like a mix, but yeah, I guess being where I am today, and now I'm like, yeah, I think I was partly right, because we've created something, right?
So you followed your nose and you followed your gut,
yeah.
Like I think that's what I think that's the hard answer to, how do we figure out what we're passionate about, or how do we figure out our area of genius, or how do we figure out, our one thing? It's like, you got to follow your intuition, or, whatever it is. And it sounds like so take me, so you started like getting interested in more in the human body, it sounds like. And then that led you to, I think you shared this experience to me before where you saw a patient who was experiencing nerve pain. I'm sorry, I don't want to tell your story, but what was the kind of the moment where you got catalyzed, in terms of starting to think about medtech?
Yeah. So part of it, doing biomedical engineering, I got exposed to a lot of technology and case studies on device development and stuff. But it wasn't interesting to me at all, but it did plant seeds that were relevant to me in the future. And then on the other side, like going deep into the neurobiology side, it was just like I entered a magical world that was completely fascinating because on one hand, like
You're saying all these words that I can only pretend to understand, right? Like
well, yeah, we're like skin, muscle, bone, and nerves, right? And organs, just to oversimplify. And I didn't realize like how interconnected and how differentiated our nervous system was. And the part that bothered me the most was like when I would ask a question about pain and I went to the brain, um, the professors would just like eventually get to this point of just saying the brain is complex, like it's really hard. And it's just like that's not a very helpful statement, like
yeah, that's not scientific.
yeah, that just means you don't know anymore. Like there's more for us to figure out.
Yeah, are you saying I don't know?
Yeah. And it was just frustrating because like again, on one hand, like we figure out a freaking iPhone, like humans are able to do complex things. Like what's the limiting factor here? And so understanding neurology was really like it was something that I could like Google to like 5 a.m. and not realize it was 5 a.m. So I realized there's something there and I kept double clicking on it. And I started to see a lot of patients on the drug rehab center. And I started becoming very present to this fact that a lot of people had pain and they didn't want to be on the opioids. But like there was no solution for their pain. And so like the theory that kind of started to formulate was that if I could help create a solution to one of the painful indications that doesn't have a treatment today, that would be pretty cool. And then when I got to UC San Diego and I met a veteran who was 23, I was 23 at the time. He had a shrapnel injury in his calf from an IED blast. And before I knew this about him, I was sitting in the waiting room waiting for the clinic to open, and he came and sat next to me, and he had like the coolest tattoos. And I just started talking to him like, "That's dope. Like, tell me more." And he, 5 minutes in, I learned that he had served his country. He had a family. Like, he was doing all this cool stuff. He was like volunteering for Time for Heroes, and he didn't talk about his pain. But just in those 5 minutes, I felt like compared to him, all I had done was like read books and stuff like that. But like he had added value as a human. And I was like, damn, I'm slacking. Like compared to this guy, like I haven't really done much. But then he told me like how bad his pain was and that when he would stand up on his leg, he could pass out. And then, there's a part of me that was like, didn't you have to like stand up to get here? Like almost questioning how much pain he was in. And at the same time, like, I think I heard how much pain he said he was in, and I could see it because like his eyes were red. And when he spoke, he responded slightly slower. There's something like taking over his processing that he was managing. And I was like deeply curious, but 2 weeks after, when we were supposed to see him again, he didn't show up. And we looked at his notes and he was in the ICU. And we're like, what the hell happened? And he had taken a shotgun and he took his leg off. And like a few hours later, I got up there and met him and spoke to him. And he's like, I know this looks stupid now. He's like, at the time, it's like, I've tried everything and the doctors told me there's nothing else left. And I was like, there's, pain in the leg. And if I remove it, maybe it'll go away. And it didn't go away for him. It got worse. He ended up with multiple amputations. But when I saw him, I literally felt like I was falling because it was hitting me hard that I had done nothing for him. I was more worried about like getting into UCSD and not UCSF for med school because that's where I wanted to go. And all those things in that moment just started to like break away. Like I literally felt like I was falling, and all these things that I didn't care about just started to like disappear. And like all I could think about was like, how the hell did he end up here? Like we have iPhones and like, they had gotten pretty good by that time, and we still haven't figured out his pain. And he served his country. And what have we told him? Like, sorry, too bad. like, this is nuts. Everything about this whole situation was just like wrong, I think that's when I started to discover I had values. You've said this, I think, in one of our meetings, that, when something really, pisses you off, it sort of shows you what value is compromised, right? Like when you reflect on it. And I was just like shocked at how bad. That was my first time seeing a patient escalate that quickly. In my mind, there's like millions of options, whatever. I didn't know, but there weren't. He tried everything. And like, it hit me so hard to the core that I stopped caring about what anybody thought of anything about me or what I was doing. And I became like deeply curious about why he had so much pain, and started doing research and learned that, just like I was getting those answers from professors of like the brain is complex, like it's too complicated. In research, it was like, there's a nerve that needs to be active in these patients. That nerve, for patients not to feel pain, and these patients, that nerve gets damaged, and then it's not able to reconnect, and then they're like, use it or lose it, and these are papers that are in the 2010s, and they quote papers in 2000s, and that quote papers in the 1990s and the 80s and the 70s, but they're all kind of drawing from the same sources. And so I started to see that there was like no new research, and I was like, maybe I'm searching wrong. So I went to other folks in pain. I'm like, who's the new researchers? And they're like, no, Melzack and Wall. And I'm like from the 60s? And they're like, yeah, it's like this prized mechanism. And I'm like, I don't know what that means, but obviously it's not enough because this guy's still in pain. And I was like,
microprocessor, it's like,
yeah, I know. It's like we had paper and pencils or something back then, and I would ask, like, and the cool thing is every question I asked, I always got an answer to at UCSD, even to the point where I'm like, I was annoying myself with my own questions. I'm like, dude, shut up. Like, you're kind of being annoying now. But I would still ask, and they would just answer. I'm like, wow, like they could have just told me, like, shut up and go away for now, I never got that. And so there's definitely a culture of like learning and innovation, I think, that exists here at UCSD. That was super helpful to tolerate me. When I was annoying myself, like they had no reason to like tolerate me, except for the fact that like they were, they value teaching. But even still, when I asked to do like basic research again with newer technology, I got pushback. Like, what do you think you're going to learn? And when I kind of looked at the root of those questions, I realized it was coming from this like viewpoint of there isn't a grant to be attained there, right? There's the risk of doing something that you won't learn anything new about, and that means you won't get a grant. And when I saw that, I was like, that's interesting. Like, I don't care about the grant, And so then I persisted and eventually convinced a few doctors to give me $5,000 each out of their book funds, which is like leftover grant money. And I think they eventually just let me do it because I was being like too annoying, and they're like, just go do it. And I think the justification they had was like, I'll get my toes wet and I'll learn about research. What was really interesting was like really quickly we had an insight, and the insight in scientific literature was that this nerve is no longer functional. It's receded, and like literally they quoted, use it or lose it, and it's no longer functional. And like week 1, I was like reading nerve activity, and I was like, okay, I'm doing this wrong. So like I went and spent 3 weeks learning how to do nerve conduction studies, and then went back to the patient, got the same result, brought it in the neurologist, and I'm like, what am I doing wrong here? Because like that nerve is supposed to be active and it's showing activity. And he's like, checked it. He's like, you did it right. And then we did 5 more patients and had the same insight. And then, it was like, okay, if the nerve is still accessible, what can we do to turn it on? Right? Because it's like the nerve not being on is the problem. And then everybody's like, why do you think you can turn it on? And I'm like, these questions, they're horrible. Like, where's the curiosity? Like, where's the science, right? Always got these questions. And I realized like they had MDs to kind of, back up. Like they had to be credible. Like I didn't have anything back then, right? Like I didn't have a PhD or an MD, and like the PhDs wouldn't share things with the MDs, and the MDs would have different theories than the PhDs. No one wanted to talk to each other, and it's just like being there with nothing to like, my ego had nothing to justify. I could just do whatever, and like take whatever was necessary. But I realized like no one's paying attention to the truth. Like they're so scared about like protecting their degree and their
funding.
And not doing something if there isn't funding tied to it, right? And I get it, like people's livelihoods depend on it and stuff like that. But at the moment, like all I cared about was like, what the fuck is wrong with this nerve? And like, how do we make it work again? Or can we make it work again? And like, I wasn't getting enough support to like see that through. And so we ended up kind of trying everything that was available and then creating technology to activate it. And, I thought it was going to take 10 to 20 years of MD, PhD work. I got into the medical scientist training program, the MD, PhD program. And the reason I applied for that was because I thought it would take 10 years of research and then 10 years of, commercial effort to like get a solution out there. But what was wild that like shocked me was that in 3 months we had discovered a new therapy. And then immediately the next thought was like, no, something has to be wrong. Like it can't be that easy, Not that it was easy, but it wasn't 10 years. And I was like, maybe people have figured this out before and it causes cancer or something, or like something along the lines of that. But we had a solution and it was working. And then it was like, how do I believe this works when it was like a lot of people that are much smarter than me, have much more experience than me, had access to the same tools, didn't come up with this. Like, why would I be the one to come up with this? Like something has to be off here,
And was this, had you already decided to not do medical school and to focus on building the medical device by this time?
No, this is like 3 months in.
Okay.
Like med school is supposed to start in like September. And I started research the January before. And all the physicians were like, no, you should be taking this time off because med school is going to be rigorous. But all I was thinking about was like, I'm going to do research now so I can get into UCSF's residency program. So it's interesting. The driver was kind of not the best, but the result was really interesting. So I started doing research. We discovered the treatment, filed the patent, and then everybody moved on to like the next grant funded thing. And go ahead.
No, please.
Well, then it was like, what the hell happened? I
is
thought
this
we
not a problem
discovered
anymore?
everything. Yeah. And then like I spent a week not doing anything, and I realized like other people are doing even less. And so I started asking questions about, okay, what's the next step? And it was like a bigger company has to come in and look at the patent shelf and pick this one and then, choose to take it forward. But there's like 2,000 other patents on that shelf. And I was like, this is just going to get lost and buried. And I would talk to the physician. I'm like, what's next? And they're like, oh yeah, bigger company, blah, blah, blah. Commercial, entities will come and like, look at this if they're interested. And I'm like, that seems very passive. I thought we were working on something here. And so that's when like the idea of not going to med school. I remember the first day I thought about it, I'm like, dude, you're being crazy. Like you work for like 8 years to get here. Like, no, like it's a dangerous thought. Just let it go. And then like 30 days later, like I couldn't sleep anymore because I was like, I have to do this,
Yeah, it's like I feel like it's when we can't not do it is when it's the right time.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really cool story, Shiv. Do you feel comfortable sharing, the past partner, or like some of the challenges that you had as part of that piece of it?
I mean, that's sort of like 3 years. Fast forward 3 years was when we met, and I've been in Junto for like over 7 years now. But yeah, that adds up timeline wise. I had started this company
I
with
just
a
wanted to
physician.
I just wanted to check in with you on that before I asked.
Yeah, I mean, it's out there. And I think there's a lot of lessons in it.
Totally.
I was working with a physician who was like incredible. Like patients would walk in ready to die in his clinic, and they would walk out smiling. And I was like,
Wow.
"Oh, what the heck? What did you say? Like, how'd you do that?" And he was really great with patients, and he was really great on the pain research side. He taught me a lot of what I know. My thinking was that, here I have this idea, and he helped me kind of nurture it. He could have said no at any point, and I would have not done this. And like, we were a power team when we were doing research together. But basically he and I were 50-50. My thinking was like, I can do most of the groundwork, and I needed him to like sign off on the study and like all the stuff, right, and bring credibility. And like, because of that, we were 50-50. And when my friends and family put in like 165K, I put in my 15K for med school, that I had saved up for med school, into the seed to seed the company. And when that money, like, that lasted about 3 years of just doing prototype work, and he and I kind of created research studies that were grant funded, that I was running to cover my expenses. It's like 15K. There's one year it was 20. It was like, we looked all those up, and it was pretty shocking. But enough to like cover my expenses, and then do some work on the device. And for 3 years, it was going really well. Like, we were making novel discoveries, doing all the core clinical research. But when it came time to raise like money from angel investors and VCs, went out there, pitched, and started getting term sheets, and basically learned the harsh reality of, if you're not full-time, you don't get a big chunk of equity. And we started hearing that from all the investors. And I think he thought that, as CEO, I was trying to cut him out. And I told him that's not what's happening. And he sort of didn't want to raise from these investors. And I tried to negotiate them. They countered him with 5% instead of 50. And I negotiated his equity up to 20%. The investor said I was crazy because I'd be doing all the work. But I was trying to stay true to our deal. And then he basically reached out and offered them more equity if they gave him more equity. And that all of them he like sent in writing. And they all called me back, and they're like, "We're not working with ungrateful founders." And that was like, I had risked, I had left med school. I had brought in my friends and family's money, and there's this technology that so many patients were going to depend on. And, I think I wish, if I could go back, like, I wish that we were educated on, what the investors would do and what's sort of market. And because we weren't, I can't blame him for the reaction, because we were fully invested in this, and super exciting. And then all of a sudden, like, fell apart, and learned not to do 50-50. And I couldn't really trust a business partner for like 3 years after that. And for 9 months, I had like no paycheck, and I didn't know how I was going to make it. I had credit cards on my name that were personally guaranteed, just to show you how unsavvy I was, with tens of thousands of dollars of company stuff on it that we didn't have money to pay anymore, because he like froze what assets we had in the bank account. We got attorneys involved. Like, the credit cards defaulted, screwed my credit score. But he was using all of that as like leverage to basically force me into not raising from the investors. But then there wasn't like, all right, then we'll all put in this much money, like, there's no other choice. And so we ended up like winding the company down. Took about 9 months. The IP went back to UCSD. All my advisors told me not to do the same thing again because he'll come after me. And for 3 weeks, I tried to do tried to figure out what I wanted to do, and basically came up with a better iteration of our device and realized like I just have to do this. And so I went to CSD and I thought I was done. I thought I was done as an entrepreneur. Like I left med school, I failed my first venture, lost all my friends and family's money. And now we had nothing, and went to UCSD and asked if they would license me my patent again, if, I could get funding. So they give me a letter of intent, and then went back to the investors again. And luckily, Fusion X and Shane, they funded me. And I asked them why they did that. And the answer was pretty funny there, because they knew of me before, and they were like, you were like whack-a-mole, like we just couldn't get rid of you. And they appreciated the passion, and like if I stuck around like during this incredibly challenging time, I think they knew that I was going to be around, when times were slightly better. But I'm really grateful for them because they didn't have to. I was like negative at that time, like everything was wrong, everything was broken. I had nothing, and I'm really grateful that, with our network and our advisors, and I met them through our junta meeting with YPO. That was the meeting I met them at. So, I think the key lesson there is like, your network is super important, and it's probably more valuable than anything else, right? When it comes to business.
I feel like there's a few sayings around that, right? Network is your net worth, and
yeah,
it's not what you know, it's who you know. But I feel like you always show up, right? Like I feel like that's one of your superpowers. That's sounds like a pretty painful experience. Like this was a mentor of yours, someone that was a partner, you looked at as a partner, and then went to kind of really undermine your mission and the company that that you and your family invested in.
It was, yeah.
I'm curious, like how did what got you, like how did you deal with that time? Like any like suggestions or like any guidance for entrepreneurs that are going through like really tough co-founder issues, or on the brink? Like how would you recommend that they handle that?
Yeah, I remember having a therapist, and I remember the need for working out like daily. When I didn't, I didn't, like, emotionally, just I was too wrecked to do anything meaningful. And I know that those two things were super helpful. Like I literally got through that, like 4 days at a time between therapy appointments type of thing. But I think also what you mentioned was just like showing up to everything, that was the only way we got funded.
Yeah, exercising it's like, are you eating, sleeping, and exercising? If not, like go do that and like come back and let's talk, right?
Yeah.
All right, so exercise, everyone, like let's stack it, get some exercise in. I've been trying to like exercise while getting sun, and that's been helpful. I think your suggestion to me about getting like sun on my chest every day, like exposing my heart to the sun, it's been a little bit contagious. So thanks for that nudge.
Absolutely. Feel human.
What's that?
It's a great way to feel human.
Yeah, I like how you said that, I think twice now on this call, about like doing things to make you feel human. What does that mean to you?
I feel like there's so much intelligence like within us if we listen to what makes us feel good. It also correlates with what's gonna be healthy for us, right? Like just getting sunlight like feels so good, and nothing else emulates that feeling. And so it's like listening to, being in tune with you know, that reality of like that which feels really good, like hydrating really well, for example, or like getting sunlight and like feeling great about it and not discounting that. And realizing like being human, like we have all these other senses that are, you know, it doesn't lead to like a number on our smartphones, but there's something valuable that, you know, there's valuable feedback that we're getting, and just being in touch with that, in tune with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that infinite intelligence, like getting in tune with our intuition, infinite
Yeah.
intelligence. I've been really working on just, rather than even like, I feel like I have a great network, and like there's so many people I can ask for advice, but rather than reaching out and like asking for advice, is like really sitting with it, thinking about what I should do, like thinking through that, coming up with a decision, making that decision, dealing with the consequences, and tuning that intuition.
Yeah. And then iterating from there.
Yeah, totally. How have the priorities changed since you first started NeuraLace? And let's step back there. So with NeuraLace, so it sounds like you iterated, right? So you took some time and then you started NeuraLace, and that was 3 years ago.
It was October 2016, 6 years ago. It's
And
5. Yeah.
you said 6 years ago?
Yeah. October 2016.
October 2016. And where are things at now? Like what's where's the company at? And can you tell us, a bit about NeuraLace?
Yeah. Yeah. So I say that we're a total of 11 years in because that's when I began this journey. But in terms of where we are as a company, we have a novel device that can non-invasively treat chronic nerve pain in 15 minutes, giving patients incredible results. Like they go from like a 9 out of 10 to a 0 or 1 out of 10 within the first 15 minutes. So it's like one of the fastest therapies that patients can experience. We received FDA clearance middle of last year, so middle of 2021, peak COVID, peak pandemic, which is, great. I can't imagine that. I never knew that was going to take this long, but, super excited that we received clearance. It's a big deal. Did it on, less than $6 million, which is in medtech terms is super lean. And so also proud of that. And where we're at right now, we raised a 6.3 million Series A in September to begin commercialization, and we found our business model. We're going to be scaling into the VA system. Turns out they own our IP because that's recreated therapy, and now we're raising probably 10 to 12 million Series B to like just go and execute on that model. So yeah, the goal is to over the next 2 years get we have to bridge the next 2 years. We expect to have insurance reimbursement by 2025, Medicare, Medicaid. And so we just have to kind of bridge that gap. Once we have reimbursement, then, we'll get paid for the therapy and we can scale our therapy significantly. So early commercial stage medical device company and non-invasive technology.
Yeah, FDA approval. Holy cow! You thought you were going to get that younger than your mid-30s?
When I started, I was like, "Oh yeah, like I'll knock this out in like 3 years." If I knew it was going to take this long, I probably wouldn't have done it just because it wouldn't have seemed, right.
I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs have said that. I feel like if I knew how hard this would be, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, like what do you see as the vision for your company?
Yeah, our vision is to basically, so the fastest way to understand it is when people lose fear of pain, I know we'll be successful. So our vision is to make chronic pain relief accessible at scale.
I like the chronic pain. I feel like there's a reason why we have some pain, right?
For sure. Pain is helpful.
um, that's a huge journey as a, I think both my parents, if not just, yeah, I think both my parents have chronic pain. So I mean, I think people that have been impacted by it, are be really touched by that. Like I think that's a really important mission, one that I've really wanted to stand for and support and unlock. So it's really cool to hear like where it's going and where it's at. How have your priorities changed since you first started your company?
Oh, a ton. And I think the whole reflection part was really important. I think I spent 3 years just like in a silo, um, developing our technology. And looking back now, if I had found the folks I'm working with now, we could have done that in like 3 months. And so, I was, I was lacking experience, and I think that was a big lesson, because I could have accelerated that part a lot faster and saved 3 years of my life. But also it was also important because now that I've made that mistake, I won't make that mistake again. Just like being in a silo, not getting feedback, like working on something, um, you know, by myself and not knowing like what market is, right? Like what normal is, for putting something like this together. And it was really hard, but and I may have not had access to the people that I do now, but I also know that I could have gotten more feedback. And so then feedback became a big part. And that's where I got the acronym, or, look for people that have recent relevant experience with multiple demonstrated successes to get advice from. And now I've added shared values, to that. And that helps me recalibrate around priorities. And priorities have changed a lot because obviously in the beginning, it's like nothing exists and you have to build everything. And now we're at a stage where I can like only focus on one thing the whole week and still be successful. And so I've learned how to prioritize, and also learned what I don't like to do, like subconsciously, things I would avoid doing, and learning not to put that bias on the business and doing the things the business needs versus doing the things that I kind of feel like doing.
Wow, that's powerful. Not putting personal bias on priorities. I feel like that leads to like almost your view on personal development in like some interesting ways, like a scientific way of looking at it that I find interesting. Can we shift a little bit into the personal development journey?
Absolutely.
I'm curious, like when did personal development become important to you?
It became important to me when I decided like not to go to med school and then build this technology, but I had no clue not only how to build it or like how to get started. Like I didn't know what to do at all, like I didn't know what the first step was. That's when I read No Excuses by Brian Tracy. And it gave me kind of like an operating system of, it was like brute force self-discipline. And I read it like a bunch of times. And first time I read it, I'm like, this guy sucks. Like none of this is relevant to me. And now when I read it, I'm like 99% is relevant to me. But it was, sort of learning how to master myself so that I can do something that was unstructured for the first time.
Yeah, and that had never been done before, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that part didn't help because everybody questioned it constantly.
That's cool. I feel like that's kind of when we met too. Like it's weird,
Yeah.
like that timeline. I feel like
I know exactly when we met. So you know how I spent 3 years in the silo?
Yeah.
I literally went like 3 years and I would sleep like I would not sleep like twice a week just so I can work on the device. but like I went super internal, and I started getting feedback from friends and family that all I could talk about was the business or the therapy. And then I realized, like, I don't know what else to talk about. And I was reading Benjamin Franklin's biography at the time, and in that he had spoken about, you know, starting a junto, a group of people he met with on Fridays to discuss, you know, the latest and the most recent learnings. And I was like, I wish I had that. And I was in a meeting with Keenan, and I was so excited about that book. I was telling him all about it, and he was like, you know, that exists, right? And it like blew my mind. And I was like, I need to meet this guy. And yeah, that's when we first met.
That's amazing. Was it the Walter Isaacson biography?
Yeah.
There's a really well done one that just got released on I think like PBS about Benjamin Franklin by like Ken Burns or something.
Oh, cool. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, the first episode, which is like 2 hours, was phenomenal. So I'd encourage you
Send me a
to
link.
take a look at it. I forgot that part of the story.
Yeah.
Can you speak on how personal development and like being committed to personal development can bleed into success in other areas of your life?
Yeah. I think step one of personal development is acknowledging that, you know, what I am today is not where I want to be. And then step two is like asking, okay, where do I want to be? And step three is then asking, how do I get there? And in asking those questions, like self-awareness started to, you know, become a big part of the process, like just developing self-awareness. I think I was very, up until that point, like I didn't really need a lot of self-awareness because I kind of got into the schools I wanted to get into, and like whatever I wanted, I sort of got. And so I never hit a wall hard enough to the point where I had to like change myself to overcome, you know, the battle or whatever. Everything that I tried, I sort of was able to like reach, and maybe my goals weren't big enough, but as soon as I started the company, everything just kind of was just walls all over the place. And so learning that self-awareness then started getting applied to like, okay, this part of my life is not that great either, you know, relationships, and then finances, and, you know, hobbies or physical activity, and family and friends. And so it's kind of like a virus, a good virus that spreads, right? Of like becoming present to what your reality is. And then I think the most powerful part of it is now you can be intentional about what you want to create. And that's what lights the fire.
Can you expand upon that a little bit?
Yeah, like I think we go through high school and undergrad. Like we go through high school and nobody has the choice to like do a lot in high school except for sports, right? Like you're kind of told what classes to take. And you have some say, but you're given structure, and then you go to college and they're like, choose a major, and people freak out. Like, but we don't have a lot of choice in most of our life. And I think for me, when I started, you know, when I was like, okay, I took a year off med school, I can do whatever, you know, like on this business. I also realized like I could do literally whatever, like no one's telling me what to do anymore. And just having that intentionality, I was like, I can choose whatever I want to do, was really exciting. And that fueled the personal development side of like, okay, like how do I not waste this time, and how can I channel this opportunity and create what I want and make sure I get what I want. I had read a quote back then that intelligence, a true test of intelligence was like, you know, whether or not, I'm probably going to butcher it, but like whether or not like you got what you wanted in life, like whether or not you were happy, right? And it really affected me at the time. And I was like, what do I want?
Yeah, it's a really heavy question.
Yeah. And I remember the first time I asked myself that, I started to cry because I hadn't asked myself that. I was like driving.
Well, I think most people, like, there's like what they think they want and then what they really want. And, most people never really get what they think they want. And so they never really have to figure out what they really want.
Yeah. And I realized that like everything I was like so programmed. And this was when I was like 25. And somebody asked me what kind of car I like. And I know I love cars. And I was like a 2-door convertible. And some random person was like, that sounds like a Budweiser commercial, like it's like on a beach and there's like a bunch of women around. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I did not answer that the way I truly, what I truly feel and believe. Like, I know what I like about cars, and that, what the hell is that? Like, where did that come from? And all of a sudden I became present to the fact that I was like very programmed, and I started to unprogram. I started to like lose all of my beliefs. Like nothing that I believed before was relevant anymore. And I questioned everything. And the goal was to like redesign it all. And I think that was I lost friends. I lost like family members. Like a lot happened at the time where I was just like, I don't care about anything. I want to be like my own person. I want to have my own thoughts. And that's all that mattered. And it was really helpful building something that no one believed in while doing that, because it kind of helped the journey, right? It's like, yeah, screw you guys, like I'll figure it out.
Yeah, it's like I'm already on the hero, or I'm already on the hero's journey, right? Like I'm already doing my own thing. So this makes sense. Probably we're happening as part of the journey.
I think so. It's all intertwined.
How did you go about reprogramming or deprogramming?
Yeah, just asking myself questions of like, what do I think about trees, and then observing the answers that come up, and then figuring out, did I see a commercial that told me that? Or like, did I go touch a leaf and get fascinated by a tree and then figure out what tree it was? Like, was it programmed or was it like learned? And I wanted to only hold beliefs that I had learned that were true to me. And so it's just like 5 years of that. Part of that was like choosing values and then like playing with them, like trying to live them, and then realizing, oh, no, those aren't relevant, like, I don't really care about those. I didn't really do anything about them. And then like choosing some different ones and trying again, exploring and testing like that. Get a list of ideal values and you're like, all right, cool, I want like 50 of them, right? Yep. But it's always about like learning which ones you're already kind of living, like which ones are part of your fabric and your DNA.
What did you get your values down to?
I mean, now they change a lot in terms of like iterating. I feel like I only have to call something a value when I'm integrating it. And so like before, one of my values was loyalty. And I learned that the first iteration of loyalty is being loyal to myself, and I was skipping that. And so once I started living it, I don't have to like put it on my list of values anymore, right? Like it's like now I'm practicing it. It's not one I have to be present to. So my list of values are like the ones that I'm actively integrating.
Got it. That's interesting. Part of me feels like there are like I feel like there's a difference between the way that Matt DeSell, who's a friend of ours and is shared on our different events in the past around values, broke down like instrumental versus terminal values. And so I feel like the instrumental values would be the ones that would change, and then the terminal values are the ones that would kind of take you to where you want to go, or where you're going based on things that you've already acted on.
Do you think there's value in talking about the wheel of life?
Yeah, I love that.
I wasn't balanced, like I wasn't flowing.
When did you get it? And I think that's part of the personal development journey, right? For you, like, and you've shared with us how you use the wheel of life as part of your reflection and planning to really like nail in where you want to focus and you know how to get support. For you, when you think about the highs and lows of the journey, what's been the biggest like highs and the lowest lows?
Mhm. One of the biggest highs was getting the FDA clearance notification.
I bet.
I was at my cousin's wedding, and I was literally surrounded by my parents, Hito, my brother, and my cousins, and we all did like a like really big group hug as soon as I got the text. And that was probably one of my most favorite moments in this journey, just because it was like 11 years of effort that culminated into that moment. Um, we get a lot of highs every time we treat patients, and they go from, you know, a 9 or 8 or 9 or 10, down to like 1s and 2s, and they can sleep again. It never gets old. I heard one today, and the patient couldn't feel her feet and she couldn't sleep, and she just slept for 4 days for the first time. And like is able to feel the bottom of her feet. Like she's literally walking around without shoes because she's like, I can feel the bottom of my feet. And every time I hear one of those like stories, it just like lights me up inside, because it's like real world data, and it's like the universe telling me, you know, get this out there.
And I'm on the right path, right? Like,
yeah, and this is what it feels like. Imagine this at scale. Fundraising has been really hard. So obviously the whole winding the company down, splitting with a co-founder was super hard. The hardest, I think, technical part of the company was like building the technology, and emotionally or spiritually, that wasn't hard at all. That was like fun. And I felt like I was thriving during that time. It was more the interpersonal dynamics and like dealing with my own ego and, you know, getting harsh feedback from the board. We have some board meetings where, you know, multiple days that week, I'm like driving home crying just because I don't know what the hell to do. And not because I'm like sad. I'm just out of energy and like I don't know what to do. Like moments like that are pretty tough. And fundraising is tough. One of our rounds took 18 months to raise, and we were down to like 70K in the bank, and you know, let go of everybody and all that stuff. And just like letting people go, especially in groups when they're doing really good work, is really hard.
what advice or like what suggestions would you give entrepreneurs fundraising?
Um,
You're like, how long do I have?
yeah. The thing is, it's very different for different industries, you know. In medtech, I think there's just a handful of investors, and it's all about proving credibility. And one of the experience shares that I have is like I did a bunch of pitch competitions, and I just blasted them on LinkedIn every time. Like before, I would say it about to go pitch, and then as soon as we won first place. And I remember after we got 6 in a row, like investors started coming to us. And before, like nobody paid attention to us. And then we won quick pitch, and then like our reality changed where like any investor we would reach out to would like book a call with us, and we start getting partner meetings and term sheets and stuff like that. And so I think, you know, there's a performance aspect to it. Of investors want to know that you can also raise money for future rounds. Like, are you backable? Do you have something that you've brought to the table? And then, you know, are you somebody that future investors are going to fund, right? Do you have the passion? Do you have, you know, all the qualities necessary to bring in that money, whatever they are? And going out and doing pitch competitions were a great way to demonstrate some of those things.
What's the next pitch competition for you, if that makes sense? Is it X Prize? Is it like,
I mean, now it's funny because we pitched to like, I just got a big hospital group on board, right? So now we're pitching to different shareholders or different stakeholders, not VCs, it's customers. And like big insurance companies, like much scarier than, you know, a VC. Because if they say no, you're a no for life type of thing. And so, yeah, it's a different group of stakeholders now, but it's the same. Every day is pitching, even even playing like tennis or pickleball, every shot you're selling a story. That's what I learned playing pickleball this weekend. Like sales is everything, like I'm literally like, I'm hitting a really hard shot, and what I'm selling is like, you can't return this. It's like my energy is more aggressive than yours, and like you should be intimidated, right? And it was funny. I was playing with Sean Bartlett's like dad, and he just like casually responded to my really powerful shot, and it broke my story. So I had to come up with a new narrative, But
wow,
everything is I was like, damn, everything is sales. It's pretty funny, but I think now I'm getting to pitch like government entities and really large groups of physicians and like business professionals that give us access to hundreds of thousands of patients instead of like one or two. And that's exciting on a different level. And I'm sure I'll be back pitching at pitch competitions for the next company or whatever, but for now it's going down this path.
Well, it sounds like it might, like, finding the biggest pitch competitions and winning them might support raising from these bigger institutions, right? That's what I just heard.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool to hear. It's interesting to hear how those dynamics shifted after a quick pitch, and kind of your approach towards positioning yourself and even funding the company with the rewards for some period of time. It's pretty savvy. Going off that, like, what are some lessons learned on your journey? I'm sure that there's like a ton, but I'm curious, like, top lessons that you would share with entrepreneurs and leaders.
I'm learning that almost everything that we do has been done before. And as an entrepreneur, there's this desire to just do it yourself because you're going to figure out, or because I'm going to figure out a way to do it that's probably better than everybody else and all of that stuff. But now it's like super humbling, just acknowledging that like other people have probably done the way I'm thinking about doing right now. And I just want to go find the best person who has done this like super well. And I'm just going to go learn from them, like not try to just figure it out myself. And if I could go back and tell myself that, it solves a lot of problems. Another big one is like belief in myself, in our mission. Whatever we have now is like 40 times bigger than what I ever thought it could be. And the thought initially was like, the mission is so big that we'll never hit it, and then I'll look like an idiot or whatever, like I'm aiming too big. And now I'm realizing I aimed like 40 times too small. And it's shocking, but it's like, just believe in yourself, and like things start to kind of, fall in the right place. And like our mission is to like renew the human spirit and restore hope by providing relief for every person suffering from chronic pain. And when I first started saying that, I was like, I felt like an imposter. I'm like, I shouldn't be promising that. I don't think we can do that. Like we're just doing this one indication, and now we're doing multiple, and we're solving the hardest types of chronic pain. And we're bringing, technology to the market that can literally, help us reach our mission. And I part of me wants to go back and tell my earlier self, like, dream bigger, and just believe in yourself, because it's all possible.
What does believe in yourself mean to you?
I think I felt deep down that I could solve this problem. Like I saw how this can be done. And then I started, layering on the critics. and like chipping away at what I believed. And believing in myself is just like keeping that initial part like pure and like magnifying that versus like letting the critics get to me too in the beginning, because you don't know if you've never done anything. Like it's like you want to see what you can do and then you believe more in it, but it's like by default believe in yourself.
Well, it's also like what you said too about like ask experts and then listen to them. And it's like if you asked experts early on, but they only had superficial answers, like it's a good thing you didn't listen to them, right? When they're like, oh no, like don't worry about pain, don't worry about you using these like tools to measure, whatever, right? But you didn't listen, and that naiveness like got you there. And then it's part of it's like knowing who to listen to.
Yeah, and only finding people that have done what you need to do, have already done it successfully multiple times. Because any task you break it down, somebody's done many of those things already. Like there's not a lot that we do that's super brand new.
Yeah, right. And then even when you do, right, like the Google guys or whatever, right, then they bring in a technology expert that has enterprise experience or whatever to run it, right? Like the next best thing.
Yeah. The other big one that I've learned is to hire for my weaknesses. And big part of that is like understanding your weaknesses. But that's when I became much more happier. Like my happiness, multiplied a lot when I started bringing in people that were really good at doing things I hated doing. And in the beginning, or what's natural is when you're interviewing, if you're not aware of this already, then I actually thought candidates that were very similar to me were the best candidates, whereas everybody else hated them. And I'm like, how can you hate this person? Like I'm the founder.
Amazing.
Like, yeah, what's wrong with you? Like, and then I started to realize like I was liking the candidates that were like basically me 20 years from now. And like more of me doesn't solve the problems that I'm not good at. And they were also not good at those problems. And so hiring people that are good at things I'm not good at has made my life way better. Like I hate opening mail. I never open mail. And our CTO can't go to bed if there's one unopened mail. So I'm like, all right, you're going to manage mail now, and like just as a small example, and he crushes it. But it's like the more of those folks we bring on board, like literally my happiness is just like beaming.
Totally. Yeah, it's I feel like I don't want to like, I'm not trying to be rude when I say this, but I feel like a lot of these like lessons are like cliche is not the right word, but it is the right word because cliches are true for a reason, right?
Yeah, it's in front of us, it's like our subconscious hides those from us.
Yeah, but I feel like dreaming bigger and believing in yourself, like those are sometimes lessons we have to learn the hard way, potentially. Like it's like we almost have to like feel it and like learn from it before we actually can understand it. But I feel like sometimes the concern is like, is there a chance to dream bigger at a certain point, like, and maybe there is. So
it's just shocking to me that we're capable of doing 40x my biggest dream. What I thought was like way more like overreaching is 1/40th of what we're able to do now. And just on a human level, that's just like wild. That's a reality, because I thought we were doing so much, and now it's like we can do so much more than that. And yeah, I don't know how to sit with that. But the only takeaway is like just dream bigger. So now I'm doing that, looking forward.
Yeah, one, I think the other side that comes up for me too is that idea like most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10. Yeah. Right. And so it's like if we're always looking at the short-term perspective, it's like we'll always get crushed. But if we can think long-term and really focus on mastery, right, and being a craftsman, then like anything's possible. But if it's like, oh no, it's been a year, time to get a different grant and study something new, it's like, okay, cool, like you didn't learn shit. Like you didn't solve this, like, and I think that that's what our education system is built on, And I think Salman Khan did a really good job in his TED talk, like just like sharing that idea of like really mastering something versus having those like Swiss cheese gaps in knowledge when they all relate to each other. Like, you know, math and algebra goes to computer science, like all these things start to like build on each other. And if
Yeah.
we have holes in them, it's very difficult to have like making, you know, potentially informed decisions or you know, really build the knowledge tree on a solid foundation.
Actually, there's a lesson there on that point. A few years in, I learned that everything I invested in learning about at some point in this journey was like became critical to me moving forward. And the takeaway from that was like, sometimes I would start to learn something that's exciting and then tell myself like, I'm not focused right now, right? I'm like focusing on the wrong thing. But what happened was like, I learned how to like write C. And then I ended up writing the code for a robotic arm because the engineering firm quotes for that was like $1 million. And I wasn't going to be able to do that. But when I wrote the code in 30 days, I demonstrated that our technology is feasible. And I was like, damn, really glad I learned how to do C 4 years ago for no reason, you know?
Yeah.
And all of those things ended up like, and maybe it's like your mileage may vary, but in my experience, like it came in super handy at some point in my future, whether it's like, you know, next week or like 4 years in the future.
Yeah, something about like connecting the dots, looking backwards versus forward or something.
Big time. Yeah. So now
Yeah.
if I find something fascinating, I like go all in on it. And I think that's another lesson is what's different about me today than I was, you know, about me like a year ago there was a concept of just being overwhelmed and that this is too much work and it's time for me to stop. Like I've done too much. And now that concept doesn't exist. And I realized it was just like me limiting myself. Now I do what needs to be done to get the job done, like setting a high standard and not like checking out like 97% of the way there, like going all the way.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs that are on the edge of like burnout or overwhelm, and they're just like questioning, you know, the right course of action, like how to handle that. What does that mean? Right? Can you
Well,
share, can you
burnout
dive a
is
little bit
not
more?
doing enough of what you love, right? So
Yeah. And it's part of it is just awareness, like you said, right? Like building that awareness of what it is that we love. Um, can you share your views on work-life harmony?
yeah. Oh, I don't know if I'm the best one on that front, but um
You said the wheel of life was important. I'm trying to get you
it
there.
is. Yeah. So I think it's more for me, the harmony side of it is assessed more on like a quarterly level than on a hourly or daily level. Um, when I first filled out the Wheel of Life, I had like a bunch of stuff to write for career and business. And I got to like all the other ones and I had nothing. And I was like, I was shocked at the moment where I literally had nothing for hobbies. Like I didn't have anything at the time. And now I've been working on my Wheel of Life quarterly for like 7 years. And I learned that I can work on 3 things at a time and some things will suffer, but I'll then rotate every quarter to see which are the lowest 3. And usually those aren't the ones I really want to work on because like the ones that are really good are the ones I want to work on again. But if finances are low, then literally, you know, making sure the next quarter I'm working on finances. And relationship and like usually like work thrives when relationship suffers and then relationship thrives, work suffers. But constantly just managing that, I think for me is where the harmony comes in. For example, in the relationship, Hito was telling me like when I was fundraising that we're not spending enough time. And I'm like, I don't have time. I'm fundraising. I'm raising like this much. And she's like, I don't care how much you're raising. And like, doesn't matter. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, and she's like, I don't care, you know? And I realized like I wasn't spending enough time with her. So we set date nights on Thursdays. And then 1 week in a month is hers. Like we do whatever, you know, something together, whatever we want. And like, that was a good way of, you know, creating harmony and like a sense of balance, you know, and just having dinner with her when I am available and not being on my phone, being present to her. And also like, it's what lights me up inside. Like I feel so relaxed hanging out with her. So it's like allowing myself to like overdo certain things and then kind of, you know, finding harmony again by doing the things that I know work, like spending time with her and my friends. That's what harmony means. Like having the freedom to overdo it and then having the tools to get back into flow.
And how'd you say that? Like if you know, without the wheel of life, you don't have flow? Or how did you say that?
Without being present to it, when I wasn't, you know, when I had zeros on many areas in the wheel of life, I wasn't performing at my peak. And now I'm performing at my peak, which is cool to say out loud. But
That's awesome.
Also on the wheel of life, like everything's, you know, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, right? And so before, like for the first 6 years, I had like 3s, 4s, and 5s in there a lot. And
I'm so pumped, bro. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's such a cool tool. So
all right, last questions for you. So how can you speak about the power behind being vulnerable with people and the benefits of like, you know, being vulnerable and sharing your journey?
Yeah, I think without being vulnerable, we don't get to realize that everybody's kind of going through similar levels of issues that we're dealing with. And we also don't realize that other people have solved, you know, or worked through something that we might be presently dealing with. Whenever I have been vulnerable, the fear is that I will be judged and kicked out and, you know, shunned and looked down upon and all of those things, like the worst fears, right? And the reality is, it's like people are like, oh yeah, no big deal. Here's what I did to like work on those things. Happens all the time. Like this is my 18th time dealing with that problem, and all of a sudden, like it's not that big of a problem anymore.
It's part of
and
being
without
human too.
What's that? Yeah,
It's part of being
absolutely.
human.
It was, I think being vulnerable is like, if our experience, let me see if I can state this correctly. Like for you and I, for example, like when we're vulnerable with each other, like our fabrics are like then stitched together. Each moment of vulnerability is like another stitch, you know.
Wow.
And like in the world of human experience, I think moments of vulnerability are when like the deepest forms of connections happen, and you can consider them stitches, you know, in your reality. And without vulnerability, it's like, I don't know when we like probably stopped being vulnerable, but it's literally like the easiest way to get the best. Well, I think you have to be in a good environment, right? Like in a safe place. But when you are, yeah, it's like I can't just be on LinkedIn and be completely vulnerable. Probably, I don't know how that would work, right?
Some people are. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I hope to get there one day, but it may have some negative repercussions right now. Who knows?
Totally. I'm not sure I'd want to be.
But there, you know, within healthy boundaries, I think being vulnerable with a group of peers is like, without being vulnerable, you're not growing, and you're dealing with stuff on your own that other people have dealt with, and can support you through, and you're keeping that experience from them and yourself. it's like table stakes of growing as a human is like being vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it goes back like that whole idea of humanizing, right? And like getting in touch with our intuition, like that you said. I feel like that's also what I heard come up from that. That's super powerful. I'm curious, like, what advice would you give a young entrepreneur when it comes to relationships, like important relationships in their life?
It's easy to like focus solely on a business and venture without, investing in relationships. But I think it's the relationships that made kind of the adventure notable or like enjoyable, because what I learned is when I only had the business, my life was like a crappy roller coaster. My day and my feelings were all tied to how the business we're doing, and the business is all over the place all the time. But the relationships that I formed were like the backbone of my happiness. Like I could always like fall back on them and get support or do something fun, or just like be like there's like a higher baseline happiness just having relationships with people I cared about, who I loved and they loved me, and just go have a walk on the beach, or get some feedback, or they'll find somebody in their network that is dealing with whatever I'm dealing with, or just celebrate a win. It sucks to like get a win and be all by yourself.
Totally.
Yeah.
I appreciate you being vulnerable with me today, Shiv. Maybe we'll just finish up with like, what's your book that you'd recommend that everybody read?
I have a fun one right now, actually.
The Ancient City.
So it's written in 1850s. And I saw a book about the ancient cities in the 1850s. And like, what the hell did you think was ancient? Like that's what was interesting was and what was interesting, it covers like 4,000 years of human history. And it talks about how like, there's periods of cults, and that's how we developed. Like everybody kind of agrees to these shared ideas and values like someone would in a cult, and that allows us to like grow as society. It's a different perspective. It's like all the same ideas but just a unique perspective. But also I learned that the Romans and the Greeks were okay with this idea of like deep diving on something for like 7 weeks and learning calculus and coming out and be like, I just learned calculus, and that was part of their daily life.
That's
and
cool.
You're like, cool, bro, like I'll see you 7 weeks later when you've learned calculus,
I could learn,
or I'm going to travel to this other city to learn from Pythagoras or something. And like we don't deep dive as much anymore. That was one of my takeaways. And just like giving myself the permission to deep dive and like learn something and do something like that. I think it's part of our nature that we don't do anymore. But it's also cool to get perspective on the last 4,000 years of humanity. There's a bunch of cool ones here, actually. I'm reading this one right now. The weirdest people in the world. The Machiavellians, Defenders of Freedom. This is my nighttime read. It's pretty fun. Kind of gets me fired up. And The Revolt of the Public.
Wow, I've never heard of any of these. It's very cool.
They're all in my backpack right now because I'm homeless a little bit.
Yeah,
but,
you're in the process of buying a home right now, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Fun. So I have the ones that I couldn't put in the storage unit are the ones I have with me right
now. Well, that's really cool. I'm gonna have to check those out. There's so many more things. What's that?
I'll send you a picture of these.
Yeah, thank you. We'll get them. We'll be able to get them from this recording. But so there's a lot more that I like wanted. Like I feel like we didn't get to dive into all the things, but this was really cool. I really appreciate you sharing this wisdom, and I think this would be a good opener to our wisdom share on Thursday.
Yeah, let's whatever comes up, we can kind of dive into that conversation.
Awesome, dude. This was super special. I hope you have an awesome evening, and I almost want to give you a call later this evening just to keep this conversation going. So it was refreshing to be able to do this with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. I enjoyed it.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks for making time, Parker.
Yeah, man. It was really, really an honor.